Good evening, Dr. Pritesh. Am I audible?
Yes, Dr. Banerjee, you're audible. Am I audible and visible?
Yeah, you are absolutely audible and visible. I don't know. I have been running this Zoom for so many months now, but suddenly my device has changed and I don't know what is the update. So, uh, irrespective of me starting the meeting gets started.
Yeah,
So
the meeting
I
is
don't know
bigger than all of
what is
us.
I don't know what is the technicality. So if anybody out there in the participants can help me out, please help me out. This is happening continuously for the last 3 days, and that's why I saw your message, and I'm so sorry for that.
So that's okay.
Can you kindly, because you're a veteran on our platforms, I know you are aware of, of our working conditions. Yeah, so can you please share your PPT?
Yeah, sure.
Shreya ma'am, good evening.
So is my PPT visible?
Yes, your PPT is visible. You can, okay, you are presenting it. Can you present it in slideshow, right? Yes,
Yes. I mean, it's in full screen now on my screen.
right.
Is it full screen over there as well?
Mm, no, not as of now. I'm not getting it.
Okay.
Uh,
But
Participants can respond if they are getting full screen.
yeah, just let me know. I don't know. I mean, I switched to full screen mode,
Hmm.
and on my screen it shows like full screen,
Yeah.
but I don't know if it is full screen on your screens also.
Participants can respond because I am not like for me it's not the full screen on my computer screen.
Okay. So let me just change the slide and
Yeah, no,
see
it
if
is
it.
not. No, nobody else is also seeing it. Yeah. You
Okay.
can stop and reshare it if you want.
Okay. Give me a minute. I'm going for screen share, PowerPoint. Let me see if this works. Is it full screen now?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's absolutely
Okay.
full
All right.
screen.
All right. All right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Shreya ma'am, good evening.
She's on mute, I think. Yeah.
Hmm. Good evening, ma'am.
Evening, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear and see you.
Good evening, Shaikat. Good evening, Dr. Pritesh.
Good evening, ma'am.
So, I think Shaikat, you have to ask him to, that annotation thing
Yeah, yeah,
before.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Preeti, are you familiar with how to disable annotation?
Annotations on my screen?
Yeah, like the Zoom screen, how to disable the annotation. Are you aware or shall I guide you?
No, I'm not aware of disabling annotations.
At
I
the
mean,
bottom where you
hmm.
have participants, chat, share screen, there is an option called more with the three dot. It might be at the bottom, it might be at the top.
Okay, more, yes.
Please click on,
Disable annotation for others. Okay, got it.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Okay, all right.
yeah. So we are good to go.
Recording
Good
in
evening,
progress.
participants. Welcome back to lecture number 3 of this 14-day lecture series of dialectics on contemporary theories. Today we have among us Dr. Pritish Chakraborty, and Dr. Pritish has been with us in previous occasions, and I am sure most of you in this gathering will definitely benefit from his journalistic abilities. On behalf of Team DAOH, it's an absolute honor and pleasure to welcome you again, Dr. Pritish. Thank you very much, and it's an absolute honor to introduce Dr. Pritish Chakraborty to all of you, dear participants. Dr. Pritish is presently working as an assistant professor of English at Acharya Shukumar Sen Mahavidyalaya in West Bengal. He is a former Fulbright foreign language teaching assistant at New York University from 2018 to 2019. He has obtained his PhD from West Bengal State University He has obtained his MPhil from Calcutta University and presently is researching on superhero comic books of Batman and Indian comics. He is interested in creative writing and has published a long story in Kindle Direct Publishing. He has also penned a couple of scripts for comic books, which is awaiting publication. He has to his credit several published articles in national and international journals, and has chapters in books and attended a few seminars and conferences, both of world repute in India as well as abroad. On behalf of Team Dad Voyage, Dr. Shreya ma'am and myself, Dr. Pritesh, we welcome you once again.
Thank you.
The platform is all yours, Dr. Pritesh.
Thank you so much for the detailed introduction, Dr. Banerjee. Thank you, Dr. Bhattacharjee, also for allowing me to present my ideas on post-structuralism and deconstruction. And it is an outline. It cannot be an in-depth thing within these 2 hours. It would require like 2 centuries for me to get around post-structuralism and deconstruction all at the same time. So it's just an outline that I will be providing today. So let me go to the next slide and begin the presentation. Let me know if the slide changes, which it doesn't here. Is it changing on your screen? Is it going to the next slide?
Not yet.
Okay. Now it is,
Yeah,
right?
now,
Okay, all
yes.
right. So I think there is some issues with Zoom aligning with the PPTs anyway. So first I would like to understand, or first I would like to tell what post-structuralism is not. So it is not a humanistic way of looking at things, because like all isms, like all theories, like all discourses on theory and criticism, post-structuralism is not really very human centric. It's not homocentric to begin with, and it's not, well, easy for a number of people, including me. I have a difficult time understanding what post-structuralism is, and it is not a movement since the propounders disowned any labeling themselves. So it is not humanistic, it is not easy, and it is not a movement per se. So what is post-structuralism? So you can say that it is a sum total of intellectual movements of French and continental philosophers and theorists who rejected the methods and assumptions of analytical philosophy. It is a reaction against anything that is solid. So anything that is solid is not post-structuralist, because anything solid has a structure inside it. So post-structuralism, according to J.A. Cudden, and I'm quoting from the Dictionary of Literary Terms and Theory, which is a long quote, and you can read it on your own, but I'm like reading it along with you. So post-structuralism is a more rigorous working out of the possibilities and implications and shortcomings of structuralism. So as the name suggests, post-structuralism, so it comes after structuralism. And as like post other things like postmodernism or post-colonialism or anything that comes like after something, it tries to work out the implications and shortcomings that were there in structuralism and its basics in Saussurean linguistics itself. So in a sense, it complements structuralism by offering alternative modes of inquiry, explanation and interpretation. Post-structuralism tends to reveal that the meaning of any text of itself, of its own nature, is unstable. It reveals that signification is, of course, of its nature, unstable. So signification and meaning of any text is unstable, and what this instability invites and what this instability does to the text will be discussed in detail in the following slides. So post-structuralism pursues further the Saussurean perception that in a language, excuse me, that in language there are only differences without positive terms. Now this was this famous concept by Saussure, that in language there are only differences without positive terms, and shows that the signifier and signified are, as it were, not only oppositional but plural, pulling against each other, and by so doing creating numerous deferments of meaning. Deferments here means that there will be delay in the assumption, or there will be a delay in the consumption or understanding or comprehension of meaning, if there is any comprehension at the end of the entire exercise. Apparently endless crisscrossing patterns and sequences of meaning. So there is not one single meaning, but there are meanings, and they crisscross each other, they conflict with each other. A belief in the incommensurate qualities of language. Language is a form of inadequacy according to post-structuralism, and this is basic to post-structuralist thinking, and this is according to J.A. Cudden in his book, in his Dictionary of Literary Terms and Theory. So there is an assumption that language is a form of inadequacy, and that there are conflicting tendencies within the most simplest units of language, which we have come to know as a unit of communication, as a system of making things understood by each other. Now, what is deconstruction? I will be talking about post-structuralism, and then I'll be talking about deconstruction, like with both hands inside it. And on one hand, I will be talking about post-structuralism. On another hand, I will be talking about deconstruction. So there will be like two parallel goods train going on two parallel lines. Okay, let's see where they go, or I don't know if it will derail in the middle. Let's see. Let's hope for the best. So, what is deconstruction? Now, Harold Pinter once was asked that what are your plays about? Like, what is the meaning of the plays that you write? What is the actual sense that you want to give? And he said, the sense that is there in his plays is that the weasel under the cocktail cabinet. What does it mean? I mean, whatever can it mean that there is a weasel under the cocktail cabinet? And that is one of the meanings of deconstruction, that it cannot mean anything, it doesn't mean anything. But there are a number of definitions, there are a number of ways in which deconstruction has been understood, or deconstruction itself has been has been attempted to be described by Derrida himself. So the dictionary meaning of deconstruction says this, that deconstruction is the action of deconstructing, and it could be a grammatical term as well. And as a grammatical term, it might mean disarranging the construction of words in a sentence. And it is a French term, and I can barely pronounce this term, but I wrote down the pronunciation so that I do not mistake the pronunciation. It's deconstruire. I mean, it's like, it's kind of French, and I barely can pronounce it. But it's a French term, and it can come to mean these things: to disassemble the parts of a whole, to deconstruct a machine, to transport it elsewhere, which is not related with, I mean, a machine is not something that we are going to talk about. But as Dr. Banerjee was pointing out, that since he had changed his device, there were some problems, some issues with the Zoom meeting thing. So, and the number, and another meaning of deconstruction according to the dictionary is that to deconstruct verse, rendering it by the suppression of meter similar to prose. So deconstruction can be used in verse, and when we are going to use it in verse, it would mean the suppression of the meter, and then it will become similar to prose. And the third meaning is to deconstruct itself, that is to lose its construction. And Derrida says in a letter to a Japanese friend, where he was trying to understand what deconstruction is, he says that modern scholarship has shown us that in a region of timeless East, a language reaching its own state of perfection is deconstructed and altered from within itself according to the single law of change natural to the human mind. So the idea that, I mean, if I want to say what deconstruction is about, or one of the major ideas of deconstruction is, I believe the one of the major ideas of deconstruction is that the seeds of the destruction of an idea lies within itself. Like whatever has been, whatever is out there, including language, will be destroyed by its own self. The destruction or the alteration, the changes, the deconstruction will come from within rather from any other external point, from any other external um, uh, source. And you can apply now, while we were discussing about this lecture, we were talking about applying the theory. I mean, okay, you can understand what deconstruction is. So deconstruction is an idea or a philosophy or a concept that says that the seeds of the destruction of an idea lies within itself. Like language can change when it reaches a state of perfection and it is deconstructed from within itself. Something becomes too big, it starts to break and change. It starts to mutate. So but then how are we going to apply it in our everyday literary exercises? So whenever a text is written, whenever a painting is made, whenever we are doing something, our own efforts to create some point within the text, within the painting, within the sculpture, within the building architecture, a point of weakness, wherefrom it starts to break, wherefrom it starts to fall apart, a weak spot. So the weak spot is not brought out from outside, but the weak spot is born as soon as the creation takes its birth. I mean, in science, if we take refuge to science, then we start moving towards our death, the point at which we start breathing, because technically our cells are oxidized, and it is oxidized because we take in oxygen. But if we do not take oxygen, then we will die anyway. So oxygen gives us life and death all at the same time. We will discuss this in detail in the later slides, applying right itself onto some texts or a number of texts. Now, deconstruction is not a method and cannot be transformed into one. So deconstruction is something that is not palpable. Deconstruction is something that cannot be done. I mean, that is one of the features, or that is one of the definitions of deconstruction. It must also be made clear that deconstruction is not even an act or an operation. So by saying what deconstruction is, we are actually saying what deconstruction is not. Or by saying what deconstruction is not, we are trying to say what deconstruction is. So by explaining away, or by negating a number of things that we could attach onto deconstruction rejects those definitions, deconstruction rejects those ideas and says that this is not deconstruction. I often use this idea that I got from someone or someplace, that when you're trying to define deconstruction, what you're trying to do is you're taking a bit of a jelly and trying to throw it on the ceiling and nail it with a nail. See, the jelly will not stick to the ceiling, and it will fall on your head, and it will make a mess of it, and the jelly will be destroyed. So you should rather eat your jelly anyway. So deconstruction takes place. It is an event that does not await the deliberation, consciousness, or organization of a subject, or even modernity. So deconstruction, it seems, is something that is autonomous of our deliberation, of our consciousness, or organization of a subject, or even modernity. So deconstruction happens as soon as construction happens. The moment you start building something up, it is the very moment when the building or when the construction starts to rot, starts to get destroyed. So deconstruction is a continuous process along with creation or construction. Now, so when Derrida was asked that, can you define deconstruction? And this is the answer that he gave. So he says that all sentences of the type deconstruction is X or deconstruction is not X a priori miss the point, which is to say that they are at least false. As you know, one of the principal things at stake in what is called in my texts deconstruction is precisely the delimiting of ontology, and above all of the third person present indicative S is P. So what is stake, the principal things that are at stake in his texts, uh, deconstruction, whichever texts deal with deconstruction, is the delimiting of ontology. That ontology is the study of the nature of things, that how they began, where they began from. So deconstruction is liberating the limiting factors of ontology, that we cannot find the origin. We can search for it, but we are not going to find the origin. So there's a delimiting of ontology. There is no way where we can go to the original definition of at least deconstruction. That's what Derrida is saying. And the third person present indicative, that is S is P. This is our this has been the Western way of gathering and pointing out to knowledge. This is P, this is S, I am Pritesh, you are listening to me, this is the Zoom app, this is Earth, and this is so on and so forth. But deconstruction tries to say that this habit of third person present indicative, that is the pointing out, the interpellation of things, does not apply all the time, and according to deconstruction it does not apply at all. Okay, so what deconstruction is not, I mean, this is Derrida's own saying, what deconstruction is not, everything of course. What is deconstruction? Nothing of course. So it's more of a linguistic um, activity, more of a linguistic gymnastics, as we can say, uh, than something very tangible, than something which is very much out there, which we can gather. Let me know if I have lost connection, because there was this ominous sound on my end,
No, you
which,
are there. We are
okay,
able
all
to
right.
hear. Thank
I mean,
you.
sometimes this ominous sound comes to my ears like tang tang, and it makes me think that okay, I'm losing connection, because it happens. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next, the Heideggerian. Now, the outside concept. I mean, other than Derrida, what we think, what we can think of deconstruction is that it is the Heideggerian concept of above or destruction, not destruction, but destruction. Now, if you have ever seen a building being taken apart, brick by brick, there also you need a mason, what we in Bengali call a Rajmistri. Without a person like that, you as a layman cannot go and deconstruct a building. You cannot take out the bricks, you cannot take out the rods, and you cannot take out even the rubbish that you often need to fill up something else. So the Heideggerian concept of above or destruction is something which is a scientific taking apart of a concept or a language or a text, and deconstruction follows this idea. So deconstruction is also a kind of a construction. So whenever, even if you are destroying something, there is a method in that madness, and you can say that deconstruction is that method in the madness. Let's go to the next slide. Now, I believe that whenever we talk about these isms, what we are really talking about are the key terms and ideas that are there in it. You cannot say this is post structuralism, but I think you can say, okay, post structuralism is about these things. And don't be confused by the numbering, it's a post structuralist numbering. Okay, I mean, I have tried to put some like post structuralist humor inside my presentation by numbering these terms, not by any kind of regular numbering technique, but by randomly applying some numbering, some identification onto these ideas. Now, the first one is disseminations. Well, if you are done smiling or laughing at the ow 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 thing, what I really mean by dissemination is that it comes from this spreading of the seeds. So semen or semen, which are Latin terms, gave meaning to disseminations. So disseminations is the spreading, like Shah Rukh Khan and Amresh Puri are doing. They are like spreading the seeds for the um, pigeons to eat. And while spreading, we do not know where one seed goes and where another seed goes. Once the seed is out from your hand, once the text is published, once the text is being said, once I utter some words from my mouth, it is open to interpretation. Anybody can interpret in any way whatsoever. So disseminations actually refer to the endless interpretations of a text. So text exists and endless interpretations also exist. You can interpret a text in any manner whatsoever. Now, this is not what I say, this is what post structuralists say, and this is what is one of the main ideas of post structuralism. Whereas some orthodox people, some orthodox philosophers, analytical philosophers, or structuralists would say that no, this means this. Okay, this ow 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 means come come come, but in another language it could mean something very different. And these two people can be interpreted doing something very different than what we know as a cultural unit for them to be doing. So can we apply it? Can we apply this idea on a literary text? I have tried to apply it on this famous poem by Shakespeare, Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day, sonnet number 18. Now, summer, let us take up this word summer. In England and India, summer could have very different interpretations. I mean, again, in India also, summer in say Leh Ladakh, or summer in Himachal Pradesh, and summer in Kolkata, where I am from, mean very different things. We hate summer. Like, I hate summer. I mean, I can't even think what summer would be like. Okay, but in England, summer is something pleasurable. So if I am comparing my friend with summer, then I think I really hate my friend. So this is what dissemination could mean. Like, once the text is out and there is no boarding, there is no point where the author could say that, I don't mean Indian summer, what I mean is English summer. So again, there are two more words which we can take up. I mean, there are these two words there in the poem, which we can see in the later slides, but I'm not going right now, but we can go back and come back here. So these words are more temperate. So more temperate is a relative term. It is not the most temperate. So if summer's day is like 1% pleasurable or 1% good or nice, then we can assume that the friend is like 2% nice as opposed to something else. So more temperate, which is like not much. So if you are 2% of something, well then if you have 100% of something else as compared to 2%, then you are not very temperate, then you are, in the gray zone. Again, in Pride and Prejudice, let us take a Pride and Prejudice, which is again another canonical, well researched, well established text, and it has been read by almost everybody in the world. But then that brings us to a problem. Now, it says that there is a truth that is universally acknowledged. This is how the novel begins, that it is a truth universally acknowledged, so on and so forth. So, what is this universally actually come to mean? Does it mean the same thing in different cultures? So, if you take into consideration, like even their culture, like in England or America or the Western Hemisphere, even in their culture, what I think is this, that if you are in possession of a good fortune, why would you like to give half of it to your wife? Like, why would you even look for a wife? It is actually the other way around, and the irony is inherent. Even when Jane Austen was writing it, the irony was inherent, that it is not the person who is in possession of a good fortune is in want of wife. It is rather the wife or the would-be wife or the lady who is of marriageable age is looking for a person who is in possession of good fortune. But things have changed, and even in different cultures, different this could be interpreted in very different ways. And what is even meant by the term universally? Which universe are we talking about? Like, earth is just a planet in the universe. So in this way we can like go on and on by creating levels of interpretations. We can introduce culture, we can introduce society, we can introduce every possible thing that can be introduced in the interpretation of the things. So um, the next idea of post-structuralism that we would like to discuss and apply is discourse. Now, this idea was talked about or disseminated, you can say, by Foucault. I mean, discourse meant so many other things earlier, but according to Foucault, who is a post-structuralist, discourse is ways of constituting knowledge together with the social practices. So, discourse is a way of constituting knowledge together with the social practices. So, on one hand, there are these social practices, and then on another hand, there are these ways of constituting knowledge. How can we apply it on some texts that are there in various syllabi, as I understand, throughout the CBCS system that we have right now? Though I am taking up a less canonical text, but within the canon of Urdu translation in English, within the canon of Sadat Hasan Manto, this short story Toba Takesing is another kind of a canonical text. So in Toba Takesing, if you have read the short story, if you haven't, do read it. It is not clear as to the who is mentally deranged, who is mentally differently abled, whether it is the inmates of that mental asylum or whether it is the people who had partitioned the country. The partition itself is based on very arbitrary lines. There's no logic, there is no um, there is no reason, there is no consideration before the people who had created this partition thing. And then let us, if we come to shall I compare thee to a summer's day, again there is this discourse of beauty. So the beauty is compared with summer's day. Now, if I want to compare beauty in India, I don't really want to compare the beauty with a summer's day. And why just day? Why not night? Like, why didn't Shakespeare compare anything with the night. However, even when there is this comparison or there is this identification of beauty along with the night, there are some problems. And this poem, She Walks in Beauty Like the Night, by Lord Byron, it's a very short poem. She walks in beauty like the night. Even there, when he compares the beauty of a lady with the night, then the night brings in the associations of ignorance, associations of loss of vision, association of ominous activities, or the association of evil that we usually think arises in during the night time. So I mean, there is this meme that I am reminded of, that if you associate every wrong thing with like whatever I am going to say, then what am I going to say anyway? So post-structuralism, and within the idea of post-structuralism, within the discourse of post-structuralism, this discourse is something that Foucault says is creating some idea of beauty, which is not always authentic. I mean, Shakespeare himself broke this whole discourse of beauty by talking about the beauty of the dark lady. So, was Shakespeare thinking in post structuralist terms? Maybe. Similarly, you can apply this idea of discourse and the creation of knowledge with the help of textbooks, dictionaries, manuals, um, pamphlets, movies, animations, songs, whatever, to create a particular thing which is not in itself something that really matters or means. Next is intertextuality. Now, I watch these movies. I am a comic book enthusiast, and I thought that the idea of intertextuality developed by Julia Kristeva would not be better represented by any other image than this image, where the end game is on, and people from all Marvel universe comes together. All the heroes are here. I mean, if you see, then and they are fighting the ultimate villain, who is like going to destroy the whole universe. So every other text, every other possible text is here right now. But when we look at individual scenes of the fight, then we find that somebody is fighting somebody. Like most of the people who are not so not highlighted in the movie are fighting like the minions of Thanos, but Captain America and Thor are fighting Thanos. So there are commingling of texts. But what does it really mean actually? So Kristeva said that intertextuality is something that is the whole the whole gamut of literature, the whole gamut of written or spoken literature, because whatever we write has already been written. No matter what we write, no matter what we say, has already been written, has already been said, and we are drawing. One person is drawing things from some other text. For example, Obhijana Shakuntalam, the story of Obhijana Shakuntalam was actually taken from Mahabharata, first book. So this is Obhijana Shakuntalam is not something that came out of the mind of Kalidasa himself, but he adapted the story from some epic, from some earlier epic, and put it into his text. So that is a classic example of intertextuality, because you need, if you want to understand Abhijana Shakuntalam, maybe you want to go to first book of Mahabharata and take up the area where the intercourse between Dushyanta and Shakuntala goes on, and where Shakuntala is more fiery than in Obhijana Shakuntalam, and you can understand the politics of that. Shakespeare took up stories for his tragedies from Holinshed's Chronicles, and he took up his histories from Plutarch's Lives, and so on and so forth. Now, then next is the idea of heteroglossia by Bakhtin, and this image is the actual representation of what heteroglossia means as far as dictionary is concerned. It means the presence of various languages. Hetero means various, and glossia means languages. So there is a presence of various languages. However, Bakhtin used heteroglossia to signify that within a novel, and he used this in his book The Dialogic Imagination. Earlier he used it, he used the idea, or he came upon the idea in this paper that he presented, which was later translated as Discourse in the Novel. So he of course pointed out that there are various voices competing for attention within the novel. For example, in Jane Eyre, so Jane Eyre is a single novel, but there are various voices at the same time competing for our attention or our empathy or our understanding. So what are these various voices? Of course, there is a male voice and there is a female voice. There is a genteel voice, there is a working class voice, there is a mad woman voice who is neither working class, who is neither genteel, who knows if she is female or male. In Pride and Prejudice, we can say that there are various voices jostling for supremacy or dominance. There is the voice of the rich, that is Darcy, and which is highlighted actually, and then there's the voice of the middle class, Elizabeth, and who plays a voice of confirmation rather than a conflict with the rich voice. And then there is the poor, the disenfranchised, the have not, in the form of Wickham, whose voice is actually suppressed and who turns out to be a traitor, who turns out to be a bad guy. Okay. Now, in the Potter in Macbeth, his point of view is expressed through language. Like, if you have noticed that in Macbeth, um, while most of the conversations is going on in poetry, the Potter speaks in prose, which shows the status of his livelihood, and which is very natural. And Shakespeare is a very good artist. He is very good at characterization, and hence the Potter, through his language, enables us to see the world from outside, from the outside of Macbeth's point of view, or from the point of view of a person who is not in the game of becoming a king. Even in Tintin in Tibet, which is one of the texts that I chose for applying these ideas, which is there in the syllabus of Bardhaman University, where in a college, I teach in a college in under Bardhaman University, and there is this text Tintin in Tibet, which is also a very famous text even outside the syllabus, and we find a number of people talking in even different voices. There's this coolie, and there's this people in Kathmandu, and there's this person called Tarki and Haddock. They are all speaking, sometimes even in different languages. There is this coolie with whom Haddock runs into, and the coolie knocks down Haddock, and the coolie says in Hindi. So even in that novel, even in that graphic novel, if we can consider that as a graphic novel, then even there are so many polyphony of voices, polysemy of voices, which all are in kind of a conflict with each other, and within that conflict some meaning is rendered dominant, some meaning is rendered suppressed, as I gave the example of Wickham. Now, the next idea that I would like to talk about is the hyper reality, and this hyper reality is more of a postmodern term rather than a post structuralist term, but I thought it would be good to talk about this within the post structuralist paradigm as well as in the postmodernist paradigm. So this idea was developed in Simulacra and Simulation in a 1981 book by Baudrillard, and he defines hyperreality as models of a real without origin or reality. And if we remember from the definition of deconstruction, that you cannot have an origin, you cannot go to the point of origin. There is no way in which the origin can be reconstructed. I mean, we can take apart everything that is there, including language, and try to see what is at the core of everything, and yet we cannot reach it. However, hyperreality looks at a very different, hyperreality talks from a different pole altogether. Now, hyperreality says that there are models of a real without origin or reality. I mean, hyperreality doesn't care whether there is an origin or a real thing. Hyperreality is original, I mean, the fake is so original that even the original will lose. Like, I don't know what to do in front of this fake thing. You can remember these situations happening so often in these Hindi or Bengali serials, where some imposter comes and takes on the role of a wife or a husband, tries to take away the money or the wealth or something like that. And it happens in comics as well, where there are like imposters and they wear a mask, Mission Impossible thing. But it's the examples of hyperreality is like Santa Claus or Batman. They are not real, of course, and but there are so many models of Batman. There are so many models of Santa Claus. The Santa Claus story is has entrenched, I think, the entire globe. And according to a survey made by some people, 47% of the grown-up people, elderly people, adult people think that Santa Claus is real. 47% of the people who were surveyed. Of course, I was not asked, but then I could have said, yeah, of course, Santa Claus is real. So and where can I apply it in literature? I can apply it again in Tintin in Tibet, where the image of the Yeti is being presented. The image of the Yeti is unreal. I mean, the image is real, but the origin is unreal. I mean, we do not have any animal, unfortunately, in Himalayas yet discovered which looks like the Yeti, which walks on like two legs and is huge and has a bad reputation or things like that. Also, in Abhijana Shakuntala, the world of Marika Rishi. Marika Rishi's world is like perfect, and this is this is the reality for a number of people who has gone there and has seen that it is all real, and this is what is the ashram is all about. This is what his hut is all about. This is what his penance grove is all about. I mean, of Marika, not of Conva. So this creation with the help of language, such a world which goes beyond reality, which supersedes even reality. And the example that Bodhriyat gives is, of course, Disneyland. Now, Disneyland is something that is very real. The rides are real, but for a child it might be very real, but for an adult who takes the child there, it might be very costly. Next idea is that of micro-narratives, and let's go to the next slide. Okay, here you can see a number of micro-narratives. Give a hard look at the screen. You can see it. You can see them. Cannot see them? Well, of course, because they are micro-narratives. How can you see them? Okay, that was a bad joke, but no, that's what I want you to understand, that only because this image does not reflect a narrative, that does not mean that there is no narrative. So let's take, for example, the narratives of Priyamvada and Anusuya in Abhijana Shakuntala. They are not taken to the Sabha of Raja Dushyanta. If they had been taken, then they could have had served as witness that, yeah, we saw you flirting with Shakuntala, and yeah, we saw you getting married and stuff with Shakuntala. So why are you not recognizing Shakuntala anymore? Again, Bertha Mason in Jane Eyre, she has a narrative of her own, which was developed in the White Sargasso Sea much later. Just like the Foe was written from the perspective of Friday much later than Robinson Crusoe. And then there's the dream of Haddock in Tintin in Tibet, where he is mocking the dream of Tintin because it was a dream that made Tintin determine that no, Shang is alive and let's go and save him. So that's it with the ideas or principles of structuralism. Some of the seminal texts are these. This is just not even the tip of the iceberg. This is the no little white fume that comes out of the iceberg, and the iceberg is like bigger than the ocean. I think there are like thousands of books on post-structuralism, but these books started it all. Like they are the, if you want to go to the origin, I mean, you will not find anything over there. Just like in Mahesh Dattani's play Bravely for the Queen, I think it was Alka who says that let her look outside. She is not going to find anything other than empty space. So these are a few texts which you can look into. You can read if you want to. Now, what are the chief features of post-structuralism? We were discussing about the main ideas or terms of post-structuralism. Now, these are the chief features of post-structuralism. Number one, it challenges the self-sufficiency of the structures. Like I tried to do some exercise with the numbering thing, but I came back to my numbering because I myself was getting confused. So it challenges the self-sufficiency of the structures. There are no structures that are self-sufficient. Like if you need to explain something, you need to take the help of some outside referent. Like if you need to define anything, say you need to define language. So how are you going to define language? By using words? I mean, if you are talking to a person, by using words or by using gestures or by writing, all of these things fall under the category of language. So you're trying to talk about language through language. It is anti-humanistic, as I already pointed out. It rejects the enlightenment subject. Post-structuralism says that no matter how many degrees you have got, you know nothing. You are zero. So that is why it is anti-humanistic, and many people do not like it because of that. It is influenced by existential phenomenology. Now, phenomenology is a system of thought or an idea that says that if you cannot experience it, like personally or in a community, that thing doesn't exist. So whatever is. It was influenced by existential phenomenology, which says that experience is the way to understand the world. If you do not experience it, you do not understand it. So we need to experience the actual heat of sun in order to know how hot sun is. Again, summer thing comes in. I don't want to do that. But then it's one of the influences of structuralism. It does not have a manifesto like Marxism or like feminism or like post-structuralism even, or structuralism to be more specific. It does not have any manifesto because the propounders themselves said that we are not post-structuralists, because the moment you put us in this box will be deconstructed or we will be deconstructed. So we don't want to be deconstructed. So there's no manifesto. Now, there was a disillusionment with orthodox Marxism. Post-structuralism was not really happy with whatever Marxism was trying to say. And it challenges many Western norms, which we will come to one of the ideas within deconstruction. So post-structuralism could be understood to be the larger egg. Within that larger egg, there is this egg of deconstruction. And we will try to slice them and see what's inside. So post-structuralism argues that founding knowledge either on pure experience, phenomenology, or systematic structures like structuralism was impossible. This impossibility was not meant to be a loss but a cause of celebration and liberation. Well, it's like there's this saying in Bangla, or it has become a saying. It was actually, I think, a dialogue in the movie, which says that, which means that since there is no end to learning, there is no point of learning. But then I would have been very happy when I was in school or in college, and my students would be very happy to hear this, that okay, it's impossible to know, so let's close our books and gossip and watch movies and stuff. But then gossiping and watching movies are also learning, so you're not like really liberated and you cannot really celebrate. And then it says that self is a fiction, it's an arena of conflict because your gender, your race, your class, and your profession, among other things, will constantly conflict with each other. If you are a if you are a male, but you belong to, say, the native race, and the master will dominate you. And if you belong to the higher class, or if you belong to the capitalist class, but you are a female person, then the male capitalist will still dominate you. And if your profession is something which is in opposition with something that is that your gender is. I mean, I was once told by a friend that, why are you taking up arts? Women take up arts. Why are you taking up arts? You should not take up arts, because that became a gender conflict for him. And I said that there are many people who took up arts. I mean, like, our teachers took up arts. Come on, I mean, like, many of them are males. So that was there. Now, the self is fiction is being represented by this image of this Matrix movie, where everything is just a program and it can be changed at any level, at any point in time, by people who can change it. But the people who can change it are themselves programs, and they do not know that they are programs. So, art and literature cannot reach its absolute truth. Like, there are no alternative ways to reach a truth. You cannot, if you read a book, you still are rendered a kind of ignorant as before you were reading a book. If you see art, if you read literature, even then you cannot reach the absolute truth. The reader must understand the text in relation to oneself. Empowering the reader to understand the text, one must understand the self. Self is constructed by discourse. Now, this is a vicious circle. Like, if I am constructed, if I am fictional, and if I am empowered as a reader, and if I want to understand the text with the relationship with myself, then what am I understanding? So this fiction of a self is reinforced by the fiction that we read, or the non-fiction that we read. We are a fiction is told by whom? By books. Because we read a book, I read a book, and it was written that, okay, you are not real, you are a fiction, you are constructed by discourse. And yet they are saying that the text is understandable, the text is meaningful only when you keep it in relationship with yourself, which approaches the idea of a writerly text by Rollabath. Rollabath was using this idea of a writerly text within this post-structuralist idea, where he was saying that the text is only half written. You can add any meaning to it, and then you can create a new text. However, then one of the things that happens in the post-structuralist era is that the signified slides under the signifier. So earlier in structuralism, the signifier was at the top, and then the signified was at the bottom. But in post-structuralist terms, the signifier becomes more important than the signified, because the hyperreality is there, because language is constructing our whole world. The program that was there in Matrix was Matrix maybe, but the program that is there in our world is called language, because everything is created by language, according to post-structuralists and even by structuralists. So post-structuralism harbors multifaceted response, as we have tried to exemplify in disseminations, and then it is more difficult, it is more time consuming, and it is self-contradictory. But does this not lead us anywhere? I don't think that is the case, it leads us to this fact that the first thing we need to understand a problem is that there is a problem. And I think this constant conflict with your own understanding of something makes us realize that okay, there is a problem and we need to address it. It challenges hierarchies, it doubts sources. Like somebody says, okay, Pritesh, I saw a pig fly. I would say, I'm a post-structuralist and I doubt that, or I doubt your source, I doubt you as a source because pigs can't fly. And then I would see that the pig is really flying. So, no. So, but I will be doubting sources. Meta language. Post-structuralists are talking about meta language. What is this meta language? These are the symbols that replace words and phrases. So what were words and phrases earlier? When the symbols, like when the cuneiform or when the hieroglyphics or when the pictographic script of the Chinese culture actually symbols? Well, but some post-structuralists say that there could be simple symbols in order to replace words and phrases. And they talk about meaning and grammar beyond the constraints of a traditional language. So, meaning and grammar can be interdependent or can be very much independent of each other, according to post-structuralists. And one of the structuralists, Noam Chomsky, who later turned out to be a post-structuralist, just like Barth, did talk about this issue in his transformational generative grammar and then in his minimalist grammar. So there is this problematizing of linguistic referentiality. Like, as I said earlier, as I pointed out earlier, like if you're trying to define something, I have been talking for the last 1 hour and I have been trying to say what post-structuralism is according to me, and I have been using language which post-structuralists said is problematic, is inadequate. Then what am I doing? So that is the idea of problematizing the linguistic referentiality. There is no outside point from which you can begin the definition of something, because nothing begins. Something that you think begins has already begun. Okay, according to the post-structuralists, there is a rejection of reason. Like when we reason something, when we say that this is because of this, we miss out on a number of things. That's what post-structuralists want to say. And therefore, they reject the dominance of reason itself, the dominance of logic, that logic is all perfect. They do not want to hear that logic is all perfect, reason is all perfect. And finally, it was developed in France in the 20th century, and it reached its peak in 1960. I deliberately put it at the end, or maybe I forgot to. With post-structuralism, I can get away with anything, I think. But now, this is a fact. Like, if you are looking for something very concrete out of this whole thing, I think this one sentence is something that can give you something to hold on to, that it reached its peak in 1960. Let's come to the next slide. Chief terms, key ideas of deconstruction. Now, one of the first things that people associate deconstruction with is grammatology. Now, grammatology, according to Derrida himself in his book of grammatology, is the science of erasure, or he uses this French word Sausrature, Sousraturi, Sausrature. Now, this idea of grammatology was developed by Ignaz Gelb in 1952 in a book, A Study of Writing. And this idea of grammatology was taken up by Derrida much later. But what grammatology actually or came to mean was the study of writing systems or scripts. So grammatology simply means the study of writing or scripts, any scripts. Now, where can I apply it in the literature? I thought hard and long on this. Not really thought hard and long. I was just thinking for some time, and I came out that there is not much today, because books are printed, which does not allow us to have distinguishing marks of the writer. But James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake is a writing that is written for on itself. It is not meant to be understood. It is meant to be enjoyed. Now you can question me that how can we enjoy something that we cannot understand? Well, that's your problem according to Derrida. You can have a text which gives you pleasure according to Bath, pleasure, reading, understanding, comprehension. Oh yeah, and jouissance, an orgasmic pleasure. Oh, what the hell happened? Something like this. And Finnegan's Wake, according to Bath, is one of those jouissance texts which is written just for the sake of writing. For example, Chinese calligraphy as well. Why do they do that, all those things? Or martial arts, the kind of martial arts we grew up seeing. Like, why would you move your hand so many times? Maybe it's a distraction, or maybe it's a dance, maybe it's just for pleasure. But when you write or when you are using a script, then you too can use it for pleasure. However, if we need to apply it, we can apply it while reading graphic novels, since at one point in time they were drawn, even digitally. But if you're talking about book publication, I mean, each book is different from another, even when they are produced in an assembly line, because there will be something, some mark, some trace is a word in deconstruction, we'll come to that, which will distinguish that book from another book. So even when something is being produced in the assembly line of production, there will be some mark of distinction, and the mark of distinction starts the moment we handle it, we touch it. When we touch it, we put our fingerprints on it. Of course, there are fingerprints of the bookseller and so many other people, but our fingerprints are also imprinted on that book. We write our name, to so and so with love. So do not gift of grammatology to a person with, if you love that person, don't. Okay, so but we can also make a distinction between this prose and poem using this idea of grammatology. We can stylistically say that, okay, prose and poem are grammatologically different because they are written grammatologically differently. It sounds good, doesn't mean anything actually. Anyway, let's come to the next idea, that is logocentrism. And I think this is the climax of our discussion, because I have heard many people go bang into logocentrism whenever we are talking about deconstruction. And I forgot to say this earlier, that I am no expert, and you have like already wasted so much time listening to a non-expert. But I try my best to understand along with you what logocentrism, or I mean within deconstruction, what logocentrism is. And this idea again was developed by Ludwig Klages in the 1920s, and it was taken up by Derrida in his book of grammatology. Now if you can look at the extreme right corner of the slide, then there is a piece of information, there is a symbol, there is a representation. Of course, you recognize it because this is universally recognized, that this is the way to the washroom, and the one on the left within the little image is for the gentleman, and other is for the ladies, or for the women, or men, women, girls, boys, whatever. Now the problem with this is that, is it really universally so? What about the third gender? Why is the lady presented with a kind of a dress, a kind of a triangle on her, and is the man naked? Well, let's not go into that, but this is what I understand from logos, which gives birth to the idea of logocentrism. Centering your idea, centering your worldview on the logos. Now, what is logos? According the way I have understood logos means everything, like almost everything. But let us focus on what logos could mean in context to this discussion. According to Ludwig Klage, or according to Peter Barry, or according to Derrida himself, logos is the idea of ideal representation. So, if according to Plato there is a heavenly ideal object, I mean, Plato says that this world is like removed from reality, and this is a shadow of reality, and and there's a world in heaven which is the perfect world, and this is the ideal world. So there are ideal objects over there, and if there are ideal objects, so there will be ideal representations as well. And what is representation? Writing, drawing, sculpting, or like mimesis, like play acting, doing something. But this is what the the whole Western world, according to Derrida, has made a mistake in. They have put their bets on the logos. They have made everything surrounding the logos. That is, they think that that something can be represented ideally. They think that there can be an ideal way of saying a thing. They think that I can build a perfect table, or I can draw the table that I see in front of me perfectly, or I can describe a table perfectly by writing. But Derrida and deconstruction denies this. They are against logocentrism. That no, they say that logocentrism is something that should be actually avoided. Why? Because it is impossible to reach the ideal object. I mean, if there is an ideal object, it is impossible to reach there. And I think, I hope I can come back to this particular 11th slide in order to make logocentrism more funny or more acceptable. I have tried to create a meme. I'm not a meme creator, but I have tried to create it. Okay, just give haha. Okay, just a minute. These are the texts that okay, this is the one I was looking for. So enlightenment subject, positivism, positivists, empiricists, phenomenologists, even to some extent some structuralists would say there is a center and we are in it. Like, we are in the center of everything. Like, everything is like structured and organized and everything is fine. And then the structuralists say there might be a center, there might be a meaning, there might be a truth, but we are not really aware of it. Like, okay, we can reach there, but there are universal essences, yes, there are truths, yes, but we are not in the center of it. Like, we can go there, but we have to work. And then the post-structuralists come and they say there is no center, so stop doing whatever you are doing. You cannot reach that center. And within that, deconstruction says, wait, what is the center? So I just try to make things a little light while talking about logocentrism. And this is what deconstruction says. What is a center? What is this possibility of representing something? There is no possibility of representing something. How can you represent something? Because there is no way to represent a particular thing. So there is, we can like apply this idea on an ideal tragedy, ideal man, or ideal person, or ideal hero. Say, for example, in Bravely for the
Recording
Queen,
stop.
uh, who
Recording in
is
progress.
the ideal hero? The one who fought like a man, or the women who fought back? Who's ideal? And while British people in Shatranj Ke Khilari, I used one of the short stories here to be an example in logocentrism. The British, from the British perspective, from the Western perspective, in Shatranj Ke Khilari, the way of life in that era, or in that place in Lucknow, I think, is decadent. But what is decadence? How can luxurious palaces, how can leisure in the hand of a prosperous group of people, how can good food, song, dance be a sure sign of decadence? Of course, you can argue that the soldiers were not getting enough to eat. There was a lot of poverty in Oudh. No, it was Oudh, not Lucknow. And yet you're saying that how can it be decadent? But then whose decadence is it? Decadence according to the Britishers, but there was no decadence according to the Indian, or the Nawab, or the people who were living under the Nawab, because the British thought modernity and progress to be very different than what we consider progress or modernity to be. Nowadays, we think in the Western terms that the more money we have, the more cars we have, the more property we have, of course, we will be more progressive or more modern. But actually, in our culture, that is not modernity. So representation can be very problematic, and logocentrism is problematic because it tries to say that what it tries to give us an ideal representation, which is false according to Derrida. Phonocentrism and phallogocentrism both come under the larger category of logocentrism. So phonocentrism, I have given the image of the ear because, again, in the Western tradition, which follows the Greek tradition of Socrates and Plato, where both said that speech should be supreme, or speech is better than writing, because writing is the carrier of the dead letter according to Derrida, or writing is false, or writing is secondary, writing is unnatural, so on and so forth. So to base our arguments on phonocentrism, like on the word, on the sound image, is as problematic as basing all our ideas, all our arguments on the fact that there is some ideal representation. And phonocentrism is one of the ways in which we think we can ideally represent something. So, as an example, as an application on Abhijana Shakuntalam, in Act 1, Priyambada tells this to Dushyanta, that your word is enough. Your word is enough. And what we see in the 5th Act, that let alone his word, I mean, even seeing Shakuntala, Dushyanta cannot remember who Shakuntala is, and Dushyanta calls her names, like he casts aspersions on her character. And yet in the first act, we see Priyamvada say that, sir, your word is enough. So word, phoneme, sound is not enough. Now, phallogocentrism is a kind of a combination of phonocentrism and logocentrism, and phallus-centric on another hand, in another way. So it can mean centering your ideas or centering your thoughts on the maleness, or the idea of malehood, or the idea of patriarchy. Because even today we often make a mistake by giving example when we use he or him indiscriminately. We do not use she or her as by default, but we use he or his or him as a default example of by giving any examples, and it is not even not just done by the male members of the society but the female members as well. Okay, but this is coming down, this is changing. Next idea is that of supplementarity. So one idea, one word could be the supplement of another word. One idea, one word can be used instead of another. And I will take I will take up the example from Shooting an Elephant by Orwell, where philosophically he says that the mask takes the place of the face. The same thing happens in Bravely for the Queen as well. They have these masks, like they have put up a mud mask when Lalita comes in. They have like applied a mask on their face, and by the end of the play we see that the mask has cracked, the mask has fallen off, and we can see one reality of the of Alka and Dolly sisters. So one thing, face and mask are supplementary to each other. Now I am adorning the mask of a lecturer, of a speaker, of an expert or whatnot. But actually I am very different from all of these things. Next is the idea of the suture. This is interesting. Now this is the point of incision into the fabric of a text. Imagine this image that I have provided here, this image of the needle. Now the needle is inserted into the fabric in order to stitch it, right? I mean, if the fabric is torn, then you will use a needle to stitch it. But by stitching the two contradictory ideas that are always there in the language, what you are doing is you are forcefully trying to patch them together. They're like fighting husbands and wives. They're like put together and they're like fighting. But outside, they are all very hunky dory, everything is fine. But whenever they come home, they fight. And the more they try to stitch their relationship, or the more the text tries to stitch two opposite people, two opposite ideas together, the more there are these marks of the stitching. Even if something is not torn, even a cloth can be undone at some loose end, which comes out from the cloth itself. I think you have always seen this piece of thread coming out from somewhere, and you pull it, and like the whole thing gets destroyed. I mean, it happens with not with like very costly clothes. I don't wear costly clothes, but it always happens with me that there is something coming out from some cloth, and I would like pull it, and then the whole thing would come off. So it is the cloth, it is the thread that created the cloth is something that undoes it. So that is, and there's a point at which the suture is visible. So and this undoing is done with language itself. Language is creating the text, like a written text, like a book to be read, and the language itself is giving you this idea that okay, here is the point where you can pull it apart. For example, in Jane Eyre. Now, Jane Eyre is written during the Victorian period, and the entire plot of Jane Eyre is very well organized. Everything is happening in the Victorian decorous manner. However, ultimately, Jane thinks that somebody is calling to her, and Rochester calls to her as if in telepathy. I mean, what? It's not Wuthering Heights. How can telepathy all of a sudden happen? And there was no point at which we knew that Jane was actually an X-Man or X-woman, that she had telepathic abilities. It is the point where the text can be undone. It is the point where we can undo this narrative of sanity as opposed to the insanity of Bertha Mason. Like Bertha Mason was insane. That's why Rochester had to chain her up, because Bertha Mason tried to burn him and not anyone else. And against this antagonistic narrative of Bertha Mason, the sanity of Rochester and Jane was put. Now, if I say, oh, I am getting this telepathic communication from my grandfather, who is dead actually, but he's saying that there is some buried treasure in some old house. What if I say that, and if I go in the middle of the meeting to search for that treasure? Won't you call me crazy? Exactly as in Toba Tek Singh. Why would you divide the country on the basis of a map that is divided? And what is the reason? What is the logic? So that is where suture comes in, and that is where you can put suture in. In Tintin in Tibet, as I already said, that there's this dream thing, which is kind of telepathy. And even if we take up the theme of friendship in Tintin in Tibet, and I would argue that if Tintin would really care about Haddock, if Tintin was really very careful, really very loving about his friends, then why didn't he go out all alone without informing anyone? Because he knew that he is putting the life of his friend Haddock and Snowy in danger. So that is the point at which we can say that no, there is some problem in the text, and let's analyze, let's enter into the text more and more. It's like itching. The more you itch, the more the itching spreads. And then let's come to this idea of trace that I talked about earlier. Now, trace is simply something that is understood and not said, something that screams silently within the dominant discourse, within the dominant idea of the text. For example, Bertha Mason, like she literally screams, but she is not given the proper treatment, or she is not given the understanding that she deserves, and yet her narrative is there, embedded, and later we will come to understand what was the problem. And then in Pride and Prejudice, there were like 7, 8, or 9 marriages, and there was not even a single word about sexual intercourse. 9 marriages. Wow. I mean, hats off to Jane Austen for not talking about it, because how can we even talk about marriage and not talk about sexual relationships? And the same idea of trace can be understood in the post-colonial theory, can be understood in gender theory, can be understood in any other areas of critical analysis. So this idea of trace is very much useful in when we are going to do some critical analysis of some text, because whenever somebody is trying to suppress your voice, um, that that act of suppression actually leads to more incitation of rebellion. It's like if you hit your child, and the child is like sobbing, and you say don't sob, then the child starts to cry. So that's how the trace thing works, because the writer or the author or the person would try to suppress it. The more he or she tries to suppress it, the more the suppressed ideas come to life. And this term bricoleur is a term that can be applied anywhere. Like it is something that can be inserted anywhere and it can work. So it's like I know, a universal USB bus. You can like you use it in any computer and it will work. So it's bricoleur is a term that has many implications that can be used almost anywhere without creating any problem of change. Then comes another important term of deconstruction, that is difference, with a like acute accent on e, which makes it different from difference. So this is what Derrida wants to call as sign under erasure. So erasure is a constant process of destruction which continues along with construction, along with creation. And whenever we are using a sign, the idea of deconstruction, the idea of its destruction is created simultaneously. So difference is actually an idea that says that one word actually leads to another word in an associative movement. So if you use one word, and that will lead to another, and that will lead to another, and that will lead to yet further words. So it actually means a kind of a delay in getting the meaning. Like, it comes from the word difference, which means difference, like two things are different, but it actually means that whenever you're trying to use a word, it will require more words to explain it, and that will delay your accepting, that will delay your reception of the meaning. If you consider meaning, if you consider logos, I said that logos can mean so many different things, including God. So if you take this logos, this ideal representation, to be God, then in waiting for Godot, there is infinite difference, because Vladimir and Estragon comes every day, and the difference is there every day. They are delayed. The meaning never comes. The climax never comes. The god, the person who has given the appointment to these tramps, never come. So there is a constant difference, and this difference is something that is to be found in many post modernist texts, including Ulysses, including um, um, Your Bravely Fought the Queen, and Waiting for Godot, of course. Next is the aporia. Now, aporia is a sense of doubt in the paradigm of rhetoric. It simply means a sense of doubt, like doubting sources of within the post-structuralist idea. Aporia is the difference between the supposed meaning of a word or a concept and the idea or the concept that we as the readers or we as the receptors understand. Now, Derrida says that aporia means the complicity of origins. Complicity of origins simply means that, as I said, there is no origin where you can go and say, okay, here I am, this is the origin, this is the center, this is where everything began. I mean, I have been naming Derrida a number of times, but there are other deconstructionists as well, and they also said the same thing, that there is no original, they are all the same. Like, if you travel to the North Pole and say that, okay, this is the North Pole because your compass tells it so, then the question would be North Pole as opposed to which pole? Then they would say the South Pole. But then how will you find out the South Pole right at that point in time where you are standing in North Pole? So aporia is this constant instability that lies underneath our every attempt of grasping at meaning. Whenever we try to grasp at the meaning, we get something and many things are left out. As I was talking about, as I was saying that this whole theory thing is a kind of a jelly that cannot be stuck to the ceiling with a nail. I think aporia tries to tell us that meaning is like in a constant flux, in a constant flow, and your hand is an attempt to catch that flow of water, your hand would be moist with water, but you cannot catch the flow. There's not much water that you can hold in your hand, or even in your box, or even in your bottle, whatever you want to carry and catch the flow. Of course, it is associated with this idea of archie-writing, and archie-writing is also a kind of an offshoot of this idea of aporia, which says that there is an irresolvable internal contradiction, a logical disjunction in a text, which are not which cannot be resolved. So in comedy we have happy ending, but say for example Ubhijana Shakuntalam or Mritchakatika. In Abhijana Shakuntalam, we have a happy ending. Like Shakuntala agrees that okay, fine, you insulted me, but since you're a man and since you're a king, you're rich, okay, I'll go with you. Okay, fine. So that was the happy ending. In Mritchakatika, um, uh, Vasanta Sena was agreed to or accepted as a wife. But what about the wife of the chief protagonist? Do we hear her voice? Do we see her talking? Do we uh, find Charudatta's wife to say anything at all? I don't remember her accepting Vasanta Sena, but back then it was a possibility, so it happened. But that happy ending will not be a happy ending if Mritchakatika or Abhijana Shakuntalam has to be adapted or adopted as a play in today's perspectives, because there is an irresolvable conflict between maybe these two people, maybe Charudatta's wife and Vasanta Sena. And also Charudatta was revived due to the usurpation of the throne. What happens if it happens back, like it gets reversed? So archy writing is the acceptance of this irresolvable internal contradiction, that whenever I write one word, within itself it will have some source of contradiction. Say for example, everyone, this word everyone, do you think this is a very innocent word and everyone is just a adjective, but within that there is two oxymoronic entities. Sorry, one is every and the other is one. Both are married together in the altar of adjective, but every and one are very different words. Another word that comes to my mind is cleave, cleave, cleave. So cleave can mean both to attach and to put something, to cut something in half. Cleave. So this is what archy writing could be, and this irresolvable play of ideas can be understood in another way from Abhijana Shakuntalam, because Dushyanta offers his ring to Priyambada as well. So if he is offering his ring to Priyambada as well, how important that ring would be to him if he is ready to offer it to Priyambada as well, not for marriage, but to clear the debt that Shakuntala had, that Priyambada had placed on Shakuntala. So the ring, which names the play, which has its existence in the title of the play, is not considered to be too important by the king, but it becomes ironically and archy writingly becomes important for the identification of a lady whom the king had promised to marry. Anyway, let's come to the next idea, that is erasure. Now, erasure is this act of cutting out, or this act of not saying something and yet giving us enough space or giving us enough hints to make us understand that this thing exists. For example, in the third act of Bravely for the Queen, we find this old lady under the tarpaulin, or the character of Kanhaiya. We don't know if Kanhaiya was really there, or it was just a figment of imagination, or whether this old lady was really there or just a figment of imagination. Or in Tintin in Tibet, on page 8 of that particular comic book that we are reading, there's this pin that is shown to lie on the road, and the car in which Tintin and his friends just were supposed to, collide, but the pin was not a problem at the end of the panel for the car. The car bypassed the pin, but the pin was there. It's like penning through something and yet letting it there, for the fact that we used this idea first and then we came to disregard this idea, but this character, like an absentee character, is already there in the text. Okay, now metaphysics of absence. What is this? This is also a very much talked about idea in deconstruction, and this idea is something that is uniquely associated with deconstruction, because Derrida says that the entire notion of Western episteme, the entire notion of Western knowledge, is based on the fact that what is now and what is here. If you look at the Western lifestyle, if you look at the Western ways of thinking, and which we follow very generously, is to have things in writing, is to have like things in email, is to have things in your bank, is to have things in your locker. This culture of knowledge is the culture of now, is the culture of here. That is the metaphysics of presence. But Derrida is talking about the metaphysics of absence. What is not said, what is not written, what is not understood, the ghost space outside the space of the little knowledge that we have. That is the metaphysics of absence. I understand that metaphysics of absence should, in order to talk about it, we need to have another 2 hours just devoted to metaphysics of absence. But in a nutshell, what I can say is that metaphysics of absence registers a complaint against the Western idea of thought, which says that whatever can be seen, whatever can be analyzed, whatever can be read, whatever can be thought about is, and looks back to the maybe the Eastern philosophies, Hindu philosophy maybe, or Sufi philosophy maybe, which says that first there are things which we cannot even think about. Only because we cannot think about them, it is not the fact that they do not exist. They exist, but we cannot think about them in terms of meaning, in terms of language, in terms of ideas, and also in terms of supernatural things. But if I need to bring this whale of idea into the aquarium of a text, then I would like to um, um, talk about ghost stories, or talk about purloined letter, where the letter was never seen, but the existence of the letter was a palpable fact. Or I would talk about the image of Bertha Mason. We hardly saw Bertha Mason in Jane Eyre, but her presence was always there. So only because Bertha Mason was not there in front of us, it did not mean that she was not there. She was always there in the attic, as the mad woman in the attic. So this is a very badly described metaphysics of absence. And as I said, that if you want to apply metaphysics of absence, we have to talk about the things that are not here and now, but the things that can be there. The possibilities of possibilities are referred to by the metaphysics of absence, as far as I can understand what metaphysics of absence is. Okay, and then some seminal texts on grammar of deconstruction includes these texts. You can go through them if you like to. Now, the chief features of post-structuralism. So it looks deeply into the language. We have already understood that I have talked mainly about language. So deconstruction, post-structuralism are both interested in the language of the text. So the one thing that post-structuralism and deconstruction looks at in the text is its language. So it looks at two things: the text, and within it the language. Language, textual language. And that is why Derrida once said, famously or infamously, that there is nothing outside the text, because they want to just look at the text and the language. So it tries to destabilize hierarchies, that there is nothing holy, there is nothing supreme, if there is nothing original, then why do we even use the word fake to have a derogatory sense? And as I said, it believes that the seeds of destruction of an idea lies within itself. It does not have a center, and there is no truth, and if there is any, it can't be reached by language at least. So that's why they have this meta language, the symbols and all, which also falls short. And one word leads to another in an endless loop. The image I have tried to produce as the ideal representation of this endless loop, which is far from ideal. And I say that there is nothing outside the PPT, but I'm like mocking, or I'm like using this idea of nothing outside the text. And of course it is I wanted to say that nothing is outside the text. So this text is right now in front of you is PPT. So I was saying that. And it is anti-structuralist, as we have already found out. This is a post-structuralist map, which is, of course, it does not really have a nice structure, and using this map you will be lost in the uncharted territory of isms. But these are the names of the people who really matter. And though there is a kind, if you think there is a kind of a center, but it is not really the center. I mean, there could be, you can take any one particular name or idea to be the center. So this is just a post-structuralist map with a number of people in it. Major proponents of post-structuralism, you know all of them, and these are people whose ideas we already talked about. So I'm just putting a face to trying to ideally represent, trying to be logocentric, and trying to put a face on these ideas. The same with deconstruction. We already talked about the ideas of all these people. Maybe not of Hartman, but other than that, I have tried to touch upon everyone. Okay, and these are the poems. These are the names of the poems that I wanted to use, and novels, on short stories. Well, this is also an image that I think is very reflective of the idea of this conflict. She is moving forward, but she's looking backward. So Raja Rao's painting could be understood as an image, as a representation, perhaps, of this dual or this plural representation, or plurality of representations. Now, in Tintin in Tibet, with the English front cover, is putting the characters on the left, and look at the Arabic representation. So even the situation, or even the location of the characters, is not central, because they can change with the language. And this was the first poem, Triumph of Life by Shelley, on which deconstruction started to use their ideas. It was the guinea pig on which they exercised their ideas of deconstructing. And if you want to get the idea, if you want to get the definition of deconstruction in a nutshell, according to Spivak, in her preface to Of Grammatology, she writes this: to locate the promising marginal text, to disclose the undecidable moment, to pry it loose with the positive lever of the signifier, to reverse the resident hierarchy only to displace it, to dismantle in order to reconstitute what is always already inscribed. Deconstruction in a nutshell. I mean, this nutshell is huge. It's like Jupiter-sized nutshell, but nutshell nevertheless. And I talked about this poem as well. She walks in beauty like the night, and the image is darkish. But what are the birds doing at night? So they might be owls or bats. Genair I talked about, and this is also something that we talked about. And so coming to the towards the end of this discussion or lecture, I would like to say that not only in literature, but we can represent deconstruction or post-structuralism in a number of other mediums, including teaching, in feminism, in Dalit discourse, in law. And in teaching we could try to answer where to begin. Like, we can begin from the first chapter, or should we begin from the end? Oh, this we already did. And so there's this little differentiation between structuralism, post-structuralism, and deconstruction, where we already talked about these things like grand narratives and micro narratives, reality, hyper-reality, there is no reality, and things like that. So you can just have a quick look at it, because I think I'm coming towards the end of the lecture. There's nothing that I should try to describe here, other than the signifier signified thing, which means the same thing in deconstruction, because in deconstruction nothing is uh, really there. It's like already not there. Okay. Now there are arguments against post-structuralism, that they are non-humanistic and it is nihilistic in its approach. They don't provide any solution, and Jürgen Habermas is one of the scholars who is very much against post-structuralism and deconstruction. And though the post-structuralists say that there is micro-narratives, but there's a danger that post-structuralism itself has become a meta-narrative. Deconstruction also, it's too linguistic, it's too abstract, and it does not suggest any alternatives to the problems of writing, or the problems of speech, or the problems of drawing. This is of course, a very small bibliography that I could pull up, and there are, as I said, thousands of books, but you can begin from here. So that's it. Thank you. If you have any questions and suggestions, you can send at this address. And I understand that I am overshooting my limit, so I would stop sharing and let Dr. Banerjee say whatever he has to, if there are any questions.
I'll just ask you to keep sharing the last slide. Some of them
sorry.
Just records your email ID.
Okay.
If they are interested, they can put in few queries there as well.
Yeah, sure. That would be better.
And as usual, a very lucid lecture, and of course, a very serious topic, a very important topic, very well dealt with in details, very clear concepts and examples. I think the examples were very, very good, keeping in mind the heterogeneity of the students. And I am sure the examples that you have given were understood very well. And it was really a pleasure, mental feast for all of us to go through this topic in your own style, that is a mixture of seriousness with humor, that made this topic, this very sometimes very difficult topic, very comprehensible. And thank you very much for very lucidly presenting this lecture in a very detailed manner. And I'm sure the participants have thoroughly enjoyed your lecture. There is a request from the participants, if you can go back to the previous slide containing the bibliography, although it is limited, but for the beginners, I think that would be a great source of reference.
I'm trying to
So
go back, but I think
on behalf of that voyage, we thank you. There are a few questions. With your due permission, I will take those questions and put it across.
yeah, sure. Um, yeah, unmute. Okay. Okay, sure. But I'm trying to go back, but it seems it has given me a long leash. This PPT has, but it seems it is stuck.
Mm,
Let me stop sharing and then try again. Maybe that would help me
right.
share the bibliography. Okay. And yes, questions. Would you read them to me, or do you want me to go to the chat box and read them out?
Both ways. You
I
can
think it
also
will be
have, and I'll
better.
moderate.
Yeah,
Yeah, it'll be better.
if you read them to me because I'm trying to wrestle with
Okay.
this
Right. Right.
bibliography thing.
Right.
Okay, so you can tell me the first question. If I would know the answer, I would try to do whatever I can.
I'll just see few of the questions.
Mm-hmm.
What is the significance of this critical apparatus if it is merely an signifier and dignified? I think it is signified, and it
Can
dismantles in hierarchy and ideology.
can you please repeat the question?
What is the significance of this critical apparatus? Which apparatus, if it is merely an interplay of signifier and signified, and it dismantles even hierarchy and ideology?
Oh yeah. So what is the significance of post-structuralism, or what is the significance of deconstruction? You see, I tell the people who talk to me, I tell my students that all these theories are all okay within the classroom, but outside, do not try to practice all of them, because that would lead to a lot of depression, that would lead to a nihilistic feeling inside you. So if you want to know the implication of post-structuralism and deconstruction within the academic field on a paper that you're writing, well, huge. Like, I mean, even if some people say that theory is dead, it is not, because it is still there in our syllabus. Until it is there in our syllabus, we cannot say that it's dead. It may be in the coffin, but it's not dead. So the implication is that if you use these ideas to see the text, then it will get to this interplay of signifier and signified, yes, but it does not mean that you do not go anywhere. As I said, this interplay between signifier and signified uh, has to be appreciated and understood, that what the language that is there in the text is inadequate. The inadequacy of the language will allow you or help you to understand and guess that whatever the author, and in a metaphor, there are authors in politics, there are authors in the legislature, there are authors as our or our religious texts. This exercise might in some way help us challenge or undo the play that they have in their texts. The Constitution, the Bible, the Gita, the whatever pamphlets have been written on those serious subjects. So in literature, in theory, this is a kind of a mm, play that it's a rehearsal that you can do in your academic world by using these ideas on heavier and more important texts that affect us daily. So I think that is how I would say that why post-structuralism and deconstruction is still relevant. If I don't know if I could answer your question, but that's how I think it. That's what it meant to me.
Thank you. The next question is, can we consider Jacob's room as an example of metaphysics of absence?
Um, metaphysics of absence. The absence of the outside, the absence of the experience. Yeah, I mean, yeah, in that sense, yes, we can. We can, like, um, the experience or the presence of the room can be criticized, can be debunked, can be punctured. The existence of this induced claustrophobia can be understood or can be explained by the metaphysics of absence. It can be. It will be a long process, but it can be.
Thank you.
Yep.
Now is from Pallavi Chakrabarti, and she says that do you think deconstruction is somewhat nihilistic or pessimistic, since nothing will come out of nothing, or just a second,
Yeah.
or do you think, or do you think it is very heart-like seeds of what exactly?
Uh, I'll try to read them
I'll read
myself.
it. Yes, I'll read it once again.
Yeah, okay.
Uh, do you think deconstruction is somewhat nihilistic or pessimistic, since nothing will come out of nothing? Or do you think at its very heart lie seeds of optimism? Moreover,
Oh,
moreover, Bakhtin talks about carnivals as a mode of temporary reversal of established order. So, can a permanent reversal of order be reached, or will that be falling into pitfalls of another structure?
well, you gave your own answer. Yes. Permanent reversal, I mean, the term itself is paradoxical. Like, if something is reversed permanently, then there will be no permanent structure that will be there. And in that, we are actually living in that cartwheel of permanent reversals, but we are not being able to see these reversals because the reversals start as soon as the other reversal ended. And as far as your deconstruction, as far as your question about deconstruction, whether it is nihilistic, yes, it is nihilistic. But as deconstruction says, if it is nihilistic, if they agree that it is nihilistic, and I agree that it is nihilistic, then of course it is the other way around as well, that it has a core of hope, and within that core of hope there is nihilism, and within this that nihilism there is a core of hope. So it's a, it's an ongoing process. It should never end.
Thank you. Next question is by Somojyoti Banerjee, and she says that is there any connection between Bill Brown's thing theory and the concept of logocentrism?
Whose theory again?
Bill Brown's thing theory.
I'm sorry, I have not read about this thing theory. Are you talking about string theory or thing?
Thing,
String thing? No, no, no,
Thing, thing.
no, no, no. I can't answer this because I have not read about this. No, sorry for
Okay.
that.
So no issues at all. Yeah. So with that we come, and of course the email ID has been shared.
And the
The
bibliography.
participants can get back to our resource person.
And is the bibliography now visible?
Yeah.
Ah,
It
okay,
has been
okay.
visible for a long time, and I'm sure the participants have jotted down the beginners. For the beginners, these are the basic
Yeah.
books that they should go through.
Yes.
Thank you very much for such an interesting and somebody says scintillating session, and for your pertinent answer. Before we close the session, may I request my organizer, my co-organizer, and the pivot around which this series is revolving, Dr. Shreya Bhattacharya ma'am, to please convey her vote of thanks.
So I have stopped sharing. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, a very good evening to one and all. I think after a very, very long time, Dr. Pritesh, I have enjoyed the session so much. It has been absolutely brilliant. And at the same time, your inimitable sense of humor. I think that is what must have reached out to all the participants as it has reached out to me. Talking about something, which most scholars think to be very difficult, something like post structuralism and deconstruction, and at the same time making it so interesting and at the same time so humorous. I think even I didn't realize that you have been speaking for more than 2 hours. I'm sure it's the same with the participants. I, and your range, it was when Shoikat and I were thinking, and in our sessions before this series actually began, we were thinking of application vis-a-vis a couple of texts. But what you did was really wonderful. Each concept was illustrated not by one text, but several. And the range, I truly appreciate that, from Abhigyanam Shakuntalam to Tintin in Tibet. There was something for everyone, and it was really, really what I keep on saying, a cerebral feast for all of us. On behalf of Team That Voyage and Shoikat and myself, I extend my thanks to you, and I hope you will be with us in all our academic ventures in the future. And I also thank all the participants for being with us tonight. Please spread the word that those who weren't, they really missed out on something truly beautiful, truly illuminating. So, thank you once again. It was a pleasure having you on board. And tomorrow we meet again, same time at 6 for another feast. This time it would be on feminism. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Take care. Good night.
Good night. Good night, everyone.
Recording stopped.